Three, two, one, let's go! This is day 3 of the 2019 SEG, Skippo, and we are live. Here at Icon Live.
Slightly struggling, like I think most of the people in the room are, but bouncing back for the last day, getting everything we can out of these conferences. And
that's right.
Again, across the table from us,
JP Blangy from BHP.
Yep.
Dr. Johnston. Thank you so much for joining us on Icon Live.
Good to be here.
Cool. Let's get right up on the mic so you can hear yourself. Okay. And we're going to talk about 4D and your perspectives of 4D, its applications, its past successes, its past challenges, its future successes, and maybe the future challenges. How are we going to use 4D to get better results when it comes to drilling wells and getting the efficient energy we call hydrocarbon out of the ground and for the world to use? So that's the point of the show. And we're huge fans of technical folks. We're technical folks ourselves. So at a high level, we'll just start with a presentation. But first, you obviously had to get through an academic career. You obviously had to get some young professional career. What were some major milestones along the way? Maybe just a couple for each of you, and then we'll get into the presentation. How did that go? We'll start with JP.
I'd say I was searching what to do. I like science, but I wanted to do something very practical. So the geoscience world was good. I got an undergraduate at Colorado School of Mines in geophysics.
Nice.
And I went, worked for a bit, and then I decided I wanted to learn more about geology, rock physics, and try to be more quantitative. So I got a PhD at Stanford in the rock physics group.
Wow.
And then I got a taste for applying science to the world and the earth.
What was your first job out of Stanford?
First job was working for Unical in LA.
Wow.
All right.
In LA?
Yep.
Offshore, Ventura Basin, Long Beach Basin.
I was working, it was an international office.
Okay.
But, so back then, lifestyle was quite important. So I chose to live in California.
Did you get to work with Jeremy Dahl at all at Stanford? Jeremy Dahl, he works on diamonoids.
Nope.
There's diamonoids in every oil sample that's ever been sent.
Yeah.
Never came across them. Okay. Dr. Johnston, and your academic career into young professional, how did that look?
Well, I think actually my career arc is really similar to JP's. We were both did our PhD research in rock physics.
Okay.
And we take that into the oil and gas industry. And for
Right
me,
away.
I went right away and continued rock physics, but quickly moved out of that and decided I wanted to look into the applications of that kind of technology in terms of reservoir characterization, and eventually on to 4D seismic. So, we went to different universities. He was at Stanford, I was at MIT, but and there was a bit of a...
There's no rivalry there.
There's no rivalry there at all.
No.
But again, our career arcs were interesting, similar. And you talk about mentors that it's the early days of 4D when I got involved, it was really wide open. And unlike a lot of things in industry, that there was a lot of sharing and collaboration. And so I think two of the mentors that I can point to actually worked with different companies.
Wow.
So that was just something really unique, I think, in terms of my career growth to have that. So,
what were the immediate challenges and success stories of 4D application at that time in the past? What was it? What were we applying it for? What were we trying? What were the solutions we were in search of?
You two are pioneering this front. So,
right.
Yeah, where were you seeing those immediate applications? And then, obviously, we're going to go into the future of those applications.
You want me to start?
yeah, go ahead.
So there was a lot of application in the North Sea. I think the rocks were right. You can't apply 4D everywhere. We're working towards that. But the rocks had the right compressibility, like a sponge, and it responded to fluids. Fields were on decline, and people were looking to extend production. And 4D could identify areas with bypassed oil, for example, compartments. And so it was developed really, I think its birthplace was in the North Sea, and there's a ton of applications that were developed there.
So I think the reason for that is that, first of all, as a center for R&D in the oil and gas industry in the UK and Norway. And the business environment, I think, was conducive to 4D, as well as having the situation where these fields were at that stage of their life cycle where 4D started making a lot of sense.
Right.
And North Sea isn't necessarily the best place in the world to acquire seismic data.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, why there first? But again, there's all these other factors that came into play. And then you started seeing 4D expanding to other basins in the world, to deep water in the Gulf of Mexico, or really spectacular well in West Africa. I think just about every producing asset offshore West Africa probably has one or sometimes many 4D surveys acquired over them.
So here's why I was so excited about this particular talk this week. I got educated by Sue Pritchett, standing over there, and she says, here's what 4D kind of is in this time-lapse seismic. We shoot it, then we drill it, we drain it, and then we shoot it again, and we try to figure out, well, what are these anomalies that are new based on the production and the change that happen when we depressurize these reservoirs, we pump into them, we frack them, we're changing the rock that's been there for 280 million years. We change that drastically, we reshoot it, and we try to make assumptions of what those changes were. It's a fascinating idea, and we absolutely need to be doing that. But bringing it a further point is we had Steve Jumper on the show, the Dawson Geophysical CEO. We had Stoney Pollock, the end user of this new shoot that's happening in the Midland Basin. So they are shooting the highest fold to ever be done in the Midland Basin. This is the craziest shoot. It was 130,000 channels. I mean, they talk about it on the show, how intense this shoot is. And now they're going to have the highest resolution over the Midland Basin and Central Basin platform 20 years later after the original shoots were shot.
Yep.
I mean, this is 4D application to the nines in the Permian Basin, the unconventional play.
Well,
Woodford, Barnett, Wolfcamp, Sprayberry, all that.
Yes, maybe not. I mean, I think what we need to look at in terms of the future is where can we effectively apply? JP said that we don't apply 4D everywhere in the world. Now, what I will say, if you ask about how many successes, how many failures we've had, the failures have been relatively few. And that's because as an industry, I think we're pretty good at understanding the rock physics, behind 4D, and understanding the ability of seismic data to make the measurements to detect those changes that occur as a result of production. When you start getting into the unconventional environment, our understanding of the rock physics, I think, is less sure. And
it's in its infancy, right?
Yeah.
You guys pioneered this through your whole career in conventionals, correct? So now
it's
kind of this newer front, and some things are correlatable, but other things I'm sure aren't plugging in quite as well.
As we got better with the techniques in 4D, a lot of processing, we can look for differences that are of the order of just a few percent in, say, velocity or amplitude. In the past, you needed big contrast. You were looking for big contrast. Now the surveys are a lot more repeatable. We use a quantity called NRMS, but we measure the signal with respect to the noise, and we've gotten a lot better. Even that, in the first few 4D surveys, people would repeat the survey geometries exactly the same, right? That is no longer required. You can actually recreate the geometries by rebinning or remigrating all the data sets and do that in the processing stage.
Right.
Assuming that the illumination is the same.
Yeah, as long as illumination is a big deal, right? But so we've gotten better, and when I think of unconventionals, there's very small signal change, rock property change.
Yeah.
Maybe pressure is one you're doing, but I think it's a challenge for the future to try to apply that.
So the other thing with unconventionals, the changes are small, but sometimes they don't last very long. They're very transient in their behavior. So there's a really interesting experiment that Apache did out in the Permian Basin with a fiber optic cable in the horizontal well it was undergoing fracturing. And they see time-lapse changes, but these changes last only a couple of days or so. And then they disappear, and they relax somehow. So if coming in with conventional repeated 3D seismic data to detect those kinds of changes would be very challenging. So do we have to think about all new ways of acquiring monitoring data in these kinds of environments to capture some of these very short-term changes that occur as a result of fracturing or depletion in these reservoirs.
Tell you what's exciting about the field, the 4D to me, is we keep learning, right?
Yeah.
And we keep getting better. And so typically when you produce a reservoir, you'll have some kind of description and model and a reservoir simulation. You shoot a 4D to actually show that your model's wrong. So the value, it's kind of awkward, but that's the way it is.
If the model was right, there'd be no reason to
Right.
shoot 4D,
Exactly.
right?
So, but you never know that before you invest in a 4D, right?
Yeah.
So, but you shoot the 4D and you showed some differences. Hopefully, you can explain those with physics and geological understanding or recovery processes. You can reconstruct that, but you don't understand everything that's going on in the Earth. It's complicated.
Yes, it
so
is.
you also detect stuff that you cannot explain, and that's exciting to me because it forces more
It
technology,
forces interpretation.
Well,
more
Right.
research.
yeah.
Get those geologists back in the room.
Well, I think the one thing I've found in my career in doing 4D, there's always a surprise that pops out of the data. You can plan, you can do all the modeling, you can come up with reasons why you want to shoot the 4D survey. You can do a value of information analysis, all this stuff. But in the end, what really adds value to the field are the surprises, the things you did not expect to learn about the field that you did. So that's really key. And I think about every 4D I've been involved in has had at least one surprise. And that's what really makes it important. So
Hey, those surprises are just opportunities, right? That's
they're-
all that
they're-
is.
They are opportunities for sure.
So some rocks that are closer to unconventionals will be carbonates, and there's some 4D applied in carbonates. They're harder rocks, more competent. And there's been some successful 4Ds that
Oh, yeah.
identified,
Really?
production processes in carbonates. So we're moving towards that side
Yeah.
of the reservoirs, more complex reservoirs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. So this geophysics life cycle, just a couple of slides up here. You want to just go through a high level of why you put it together and in this way. It's interesting. It's obviously timeline and things like that.
Well, I think what I want to do is put 4D monitoring in the context of the applications of seismic data throughout the life cycle of a field. When we move from exploration through to development and production, there are different drivers, there are different business drivers, there are different technical drivers that control the way we use seismic data and what kind of seismic data that we acquire. So, in early exploration, what are we asked to do as a geophysicist? We want to determine the structural and stratigraphic setting of our reservoirs. We want to define the trap. We want to be able to detect hydrocarbons. Are they there? How much oil is in the ground?
Sure.
And all of that serves to generate opportunities for exploration wells. And to do that, then we have data. We may have 2D data, some exploration grade 3D data, but very little well control at that
Right.
stage
Yeah.
and things like that. So we move on to development. From a business point of view, you're really trying to minimize cost in these
Right.
in these developments. And from a technical point of view, we're trying to better characterize our reservoirs so we know where to drill those development wells. We want to know where the fluid contacts are. We want to start developing these models that, although they are wrong for sure, might be useful and
Absolutely, it's
and
useful.
helping us plan how we're going to deplete the field.
So
And
I
then
read. Go ahead.
yeah,
Just
well,
a
then
quick-
we have more detailed 3D seismic data to help us out doing that. Now let's back up yet.
The what I was going to say, and sorry to interrupt, was I feel like definitely in the unconventionals, we should be planning for that 4D shoot. We should have the original, and in the plans and in the budget must be 4D because something is absolutely changing in this unconventional. We're getting this unbelievable amount of fluid back that doesn't even match up to the K-Fee relationship. There's a mass balance problem.
Sure.
For sure. Where's it all coming from? And why is that one mostly oil and that one mostly water? What is going on here? There's so much moving. It's so dynamic that we must capture that time-lapse data. We must enter the 4D, and it needs to be in the budget, and we need to be shooting over the whole basin. I mean, this 850-mile square shoot is going to provide something. It's going to be a visual and a model that helps us to better understand pressure depletion, pressure-dependent permeability issues, what's going on, what is actually moving in these reservoirs. Is the TOC changing, right? I mean, it's not just about porosity and permeability in this system. That's not right. There's more to it. Otherwise, we would have it all figured out and we'd mass balance a little bit better if that was the case. There's something else going on, and we have to figure it out.
Well, it's
And I think-
definitely not porosity and permeability. I think that one's pretty clear. But
So we must apply 4D.
So 4D, as you described, is great because you can see in between the wells. You need something. It's kind of like a medical tomography type of analogy, right?
Okay.
You want to see away from the wells. There's not much available to engineers. There's tracer tests.
Bad.
Apart
Bad.
from that,
Yep.
you don't have much. So
Yeah.
the thing is, the big challenge for 4D to be applied for unconventionals, costs got to come down. It's
Cost
gotta-
of the acquisition and
yeah,
and
the costs
shooting.
are significant, and so I think they need to come down.
It's cost and data quality as well. The reason why they're shooting so many channels in this survey is that you need the data density in order to get the quality of imaging that you need to do things like 4D.
Wow.
So
There you go.
that's what they're doing is pretty amazing. But you go to the Middle East and they have even more, channel counts, higher data densities.
No
and,
kidding. There's bigger shoots
yeah,
out there.
Yeah. So I think that that's one thing. I think we also again need to have a better understanding of the rock physics of what's actually going down in the subsurface, so we can at least model that a little bit and understand how that can affect our seismic response. But your comment that certainly, and this is true in conventional reservoirs, any survey that we shoot, and going back to when we in the development phase of a field, when we're getting a high resolution 3D survey to help us locate those development wells, that's what serves as the baseline for 4D. And so you have to have this idea in your head from the very beginning, all the way from exploration,
Yep.
that you're going to be doing 4D,
Right.
Yeah.
and plan for it. So your comment about planning for 4D is absolutely spot on. I mean, that thing's
But
we had to
we're
get to
kinda-
that stage in conventional fields, and we will need to get to that stage eventually in unconventional fields.
Wow. And we kind of missed the boat a little bit. We're already blowing and going. We got over 20,000 horizontal wells in the Permian Basin already, I
Yep.
think. Or maybe over 25,000. So we're a little bit past that. We need your expertise to get us back to the point of, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's do a little look back. Let's get back through this, assuming these wells weren't ever drilled, right? And maybe you can progress through that. I want to know if Icon is doing that. Is Icon supplying to the Fairfield and this whole shoot, this brand new thing? Are you guys the ones driving the future of 4D application? Why wouldn't it be you?
I see that smirk.
Oh, you're BHP. I'm sorry, and you're a doctor that's.
And I'm
advising
an
for-
independent consultant, so
I know you had something to do with the buttons behind Rock Doc.
Perhaps, but yeah, I think
Perhaps.
I think you need more data really to
Right.
understand these. They're complex reservoirs. You're as a geologist, right? So
Right.
you know that low energy type unconventionals, they tend to be layered.
Yeah.
They're anisotropic.
They're
Right.
hybrids, right?
They're
Not. It's not
hybrids,
layer,
exactly.
layer cake, right? You
What-
have these little debris flows, these little stringers, and that's where people think the deliverables are. And
Yeah.
I have a lot of issues with that as
So
well. But
what people thought would initially they were continuous, and they're
Right.
actually extremely heterogeneous,
Right.
right? So something like 4D would help, obviously, to try and understand what's going on. The other thing, don't forget, a lot of these unconventionals, they produce a lot of water, right? The ratio of the water cut is high.
terrible!
So we track water.
Absolutely terrible.
We don't just track oil, we track water, right?
Yeah.
So any change is tracked. Stress
Work.
changes, any changes. Yeah.
I think ultimately it's going to be your ability to detect stress changes and the impact that's going to have on anisotropy and other, elastic and anelastic parameters of the subsurface that might make the difference in terms of monitoring unconventionals. And it's, it might take an industry-wide effort to try to get there, and maybe greater collaboration among the producers, the oil and gas companies, the contractors that acquire the data. That might be
Sure.
required to really, to nail this one way or another.
Sure.
And we haven't even gotten into the issues related to acquisition on land and all the challenges
Oh, my
that
gosh,
has
yeah.
relative to marine acquisition. And I think that again, we're making a lot of progress, and that survey in the Permian Basin right now is a step towards that. But
Yeah.
the data quality that we're seeing is getting better and better, and there's a lot of technology out there that really facilitates land acquisition. You can see it here on the exhibit floor. So I think that there's an opportunity as we move forward to really see greater applications, in these types of environments.
So what you asked the question, what can Icon or companies like that bring?
Yeah.
I think seeing differences through production phenomena. So we also inject typically, right?
Right.
But that's
Right.
got a big effect. But seeing production changes is one thing. Understanding them, truly understanding what's going on, is the next level. And you need to develop sophisticated rock models, right? Or subsurface models.
Right.
And that's where companies like Icon and others can really help bring this technology to the next level.
Yep.
Right.
That's what I think.
I absolutely agree. And the more I learn about Icon at Icon Live, about iPoint data management system, because you're talking about data management. How are you going to manage the injection over time, the production over time, right? Shutting in, but all that, it's an incredibly complex database to control over time. You got iPoint, and then you got RockDoc, who I think has the tools that you're speaking of to do this. So Icon does have the solutions. They need your help. Yes, they do. So here's the application. Here's where I was thinking of application. Correct me if I'm wrong. Seismic captures the dynamic stress, not the static, right? Of faults and how HMAX is moving away from faults and structural complexity. We're capturing the dynamic stress, not the static. Correct?
Correct.
4D seismic, certainly, yes.
So then we can figure out old seismic dynamic stress based on structure, what HMAX is doing along that wellbore relative to the structure, because tectonics are always pressured. So these things are changing all over the place, and it makes sense to a structural geologist. And now we relieved a bunch of pressure. Now we injected, we actually like created tectonic forces, put the sand away, and then we drained all that fluid. And now we're shooting it again, and we're capturing again for one more time a dynamic stress of the system. So now now we're developing the field. Now we know why they're getting the frac hits where we are, or why those fracs aren't getting put away so easily. You think your HMAX is that direction, but it totally changed because of the last wellbore you fracked. You're actually parallel to maximum horizontal stress, or maybe you're at that 45-degree angle and causing shear, and no fracs put away at all.
So
We're going to capture that.
So for unconventionals,
Theoretically.
you got to couple that with permanent, passive monitoring, which you can do in 4D sense. Just repeat the passive monitoring of the micro seismicity that's occurring in a 3D sense. You can repeat that and see how it changes, right?
Wow. How do we keep up with you guys? Because I want to follow the papers you write, the presentations you give from this point on.
Okay.
How do I do that? How do I contact you? How do I follow you guys? Website? Website?
No, I should, but I don't. I've locked down a couple of domains.
Not
Thank
sure
you.
Put them in the back pocket.
Thank you, GoDaddy.
Okay, well, we have your contact information.
my
We will
contact.
certainly share that with the world, because with integrating some software like we have at Icon, with brains like yours and the experiences you have and the new ideas that the people around us have, we will make a positive impact on this industry, and we're going to do it tomorrow. So I'm interested in the paper you have coming out soon, as well as yours, as ours. The industry is progressing. The world is changing. The paradigms are shifting, and we're getting better. The step changes among us. We're living through it. And I'm so excited to see what you guys end up doing. And thank you so much it was an absolute honor to share these microphones with you. Skips, we out.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.